here we go, here we go. Okay, I just wanted to look a little bit at the diversity of tapeworms, just to look at a couple of species that we haven't yet, some of which you might encounter, and also make a couple of points about how evolution works in this group. We've already seen that true tapeworms, or Eucestoda, are part of this larger group called the Cestodaria. And the very earliest branch off the Cestodaria is that weird group called the Gyrocotylidia, which have those ruffles on the sides and on the rear, and they're parasitic in this group of cartilaginous fish called the chimeras. The second branch off the tree, the amphiliniids, are mostly parasites of fish, and there's a few that have made host switches that parasitize freshwater turtles. And then all the rest, the Eucestoda, that's the true tapeworms, traditionally there's 15 orders, although some of those are getting broken up or redefined. But of the traditional 15 orders, 10 of them parasitize only fish. Shut up. 2 more of them parasitize either marine mammals, or they opportunistically parasitize land mammals that eat fish. So most of the evolutionary diversity of tapeworms is in fish. There are entire, suborders that live nowhere but sharks. And if you do a cladistic analysis, it looks like this. I forgot to post where I got this, but this is a fairly recent paper that draws on some new genetic data to look at the relationships of tapeworms. And if you can't see all of the detail, it's not really critical. All of the taxa that are outlined in dark blue are unique to fish. There's a whole bunch of them that most people would never see unless you decided to go and become a specialist in fish parasites. Spathobothriids and Caryophiliids and Trypanorincans and Pseudophilidians and so on. That seems to be where most of the diversity is. And there's a fairly small number of groups that have ever gone on to parasitize anything else. In particular, almost all of the ones that you would encounter in medicine or in veterinary practice, unless you're, like a fish vet, are in a group that's down at the bottom called the cyclophiliids. This is where your pork tapeworm and beef tapeworm and dwarf tapeworm and things like that. This is where they're all found. Almost all of them are in one suborder, Cyclophilidia. And we don't have time to cover all of the ones that are found only in fish. It's not that they're not fascinating and unique and informative with respect to how this group has evolved. But, in the interest of, trying to finish the course before the end of the semester, I'm only going to show you a few highlights. The earliest branches are monozoic, which means they've only got one proglottid, or at least only one at a time. True tapeworms and the Eucestoda, you can tell those because they are divided into a scolex, or a head for attachment, and then the proglottids are where you find the gonads. And this happens to be a parasite of carp, Caryophilia. You can see there's a scolex, and it's kind of odd. It's got this sort of conical shape to it, and a neck behind the scolex, and then behind the scolex, there's only one proglottid. So this group parasitizes saprinids and silurids, which means they parasitize carp and catfish. One of them is a parasite of goldfish, and that's actually become an introduced species in several parts of the world. What effect it might have in nature, I'm not entirely sure. But there are some introduced caryophylliids that seem to be becoming more common worldwide, mostly in carp. So we call this being monozoic, by the way, if you've got only one proglottid and one set of gonads, or at least only one at a time. Diphyllobothriids are one of these groups that's opportunistic. They parasitize cetaceans and pinnipeds, i.e. whales and seals. These will typically, eggs pass out in the feces. The larvae will parasitize crustaceans, little copepods and things. Those get eaten by fish, where they develop into procercoid larvae. And then when the fish get eaten by whales and seals, the adults hatch out and mature in the gut of the whales and seals. This group includes a whale parasite that gets up to 100 feet long. I think it's Tetraphyllum. I mentioned it a long time ago, but there is a parasite of whales that gets up to 100 feet. And this includes Diphyllobothrium, which is an opportunistic parasite of humans. Several species can infect humans, including Diphyllobothrium nihonkaense, which is what was being removed from that Japanese gentleman's posterior in that picture I showed that may have scarred some of you for life. That's a very long tapeworm, and Diphyllobothrium latum is the longest tapeworm that infects humans. It'll get up to 30 feet. Over on the right, you can see a Scolex, and this particular genus only has a pair of bothria. You might remember that those are kind of groove-shaped suction cups. And, I mean, it's kind of flattened, but at the, above and below, you can see each side has a groove with a pair of kind of leafy edges surrounding it. That's what you're seeing, the bothria. So those early branches off the tree don't have suckers. They've either got, a bothrium, or they've got, some of them have kind of a leafy attachment-shaped organ, but only one of them. And it's not until you get a ways up the tree that you start finding parasites with suckers. And this is one, Proteocephalida. You can see the proglottids are quite big. The Scolex is really tiny. And this is the first group we've seen that has 4 round suckers. These are mostly fish parasites, but there are some that have evolved to parasitize amphibians and reptiles. None that I know of in birds or mammals. Might encounter them if you're doing, exotic veterinary work. I know at least one of you was thinking about being a vet in the zoo. And I guess it's possible you might encounter those there, but they don't parasitize anything that most humans concern themselves with. And if you look at the close-up of the Scolex below, you can see the suckers. The suckers, this is a word you've seen before. They're called acetabula. Remember that an acetabulum was a cup used for serving vinegar back in Roman days. And so acetabulum is a term that gets used for any cup-shaped structure. I think I mentioned that your hip socket is called an acetabulum because it's very round and, well, cup-shaped because the ball of your femur fits into it. The same word is used for suckers on some flukes and also the suckers on the heads of some tapeworms. So the vast majority of tapeworms that parasitize humans and animals of veterinary importance are in one suborder, the cyclophyllids. This is a picture that I hope doesn't give anybody nightmares. This is a scanning electron micrograph of Taenia, the most common human tapeworm. It's been colorized, by the way. It doesn't really, look like, Sauron meets Predator. It's not really, it doesn't really have eyes that are glowing orange. That was added color. But what look to your brain like eyes aren't actually eyes. That's those suckers, and there's 4 of them. 2 you can see and 2 on the other side. And this group also has an extensive rostrum, in case with hooks on it, although not all of these have hooks on the rostrum. And that, again, is, of course, attachment organs, little crampons latching into your intestinal wall. You might recall that Taenia includes human tapeworms that you get from eating beef or pork. And eggs pass out in feces in areas where human feces come into contact with whatever the local pigs or cows are eating. If human feces are used as fertilizer, or if people just cop a squat in the cow pastures or something like that, the eggs may get consumed by cows or pigs. They hatch into hexacanth larvae. Those tear their way into the muscles and form these round resting stages called cysticerci. This is another view of Cysticercus infected meat. This is what meat inspectors are looking for when they're looking for measles. Beef measles and pork measles is the term they use for beef or pork infected with Cysticerci. And this, of course, is what you can't sell. Because if you swallow a Cysticercus, if it hasn't been thoroughly cooked, each one of those contains a little scolex, which will pop right out and latch into your intestinal wall and start growing into an adult tapeworm. There's another species of importance, mostly in Australia and China. I'm not sure how bad it is in the US. Taenia ovis infects sheep. In this case, the definitive host is the dog, and as far as I know, it does not normally infect humans. Dogs get it from eating sheep meat, which I guess dogs aren't really supposed to do, but if you're a sheep farmer that feeds your dogs scraps left over from the slaughtering, they might get it. Eggs pass out in the dog feces, and then if sheep eat grass that's contaminated with dog feces, they'll get Cysticerci. And it's a matter of concern. It can't infect humans, but you can't really sell meat that looks like this. Nobody is going to want to buy meat that is loaded with these little, round, blobby, measly looking things. So even though it can't infect humans, you have to dispose of meat that's infected like this, and it does cause economic loss in the sheep industry. Little evolutionary sideline. Taenia solium's the pork tapeworm, and I've outlined it in blue. An evolutionary study of tapeworms showed that the closest relative of T. solium is Taenia hyena, which infects hyenas and African wild dogs. The next closest relative, Taenia crocuti, is also a parasite of hyenas. The next one down, Taenia gunyami, is a parasite of lions and cheetahs. And then if you look at T. saginata, the pork tapeworm, and Taenia asiatica, another human species, the closest relative is a parasite of lions. Now, you might recall way, way back, I was talking about a completely different, unrelated group of parasites, human pinworm. Pinworm is a nematode. We haven't even talked about nematodes as yet. But you get pinworm in your lower intestine, and they're notorious for crawling out of your anus, laying eggs on the folds of skin, and then crawling back in. This makes your butt itchy, you scratch, You put your fingers in your mouth and the eggs go on to infect you or infect somebody else. In pinworm, the closest relative of your pinworm, of human pinworm, is chimpanzee pinworm and gorilla pinworm. This is one of those cases where the phylogeny of the parasites is an almost perfect mirror of the phylogeny of the hosts. And that suggests a lot of co-speciation. What happened was that every time our ancestors divided into species, their pinworm parasites divided right along with them. We talked about that in maybe the first or second week. Co-speciation of humans and parasites. This has clearly not happened here. Our closest relatives to humans are neither hyenas nor lions. First of all, it's significant that the closest relatives of our tapeworm parasites are parasites in African mammals, which further supports the hypothesis that humanity evolved in Africa. And it suggests a likely scenario for how we got them. Our African ancestors adopted an increasingly carnivorous diet. Monkeys and most apes are primarily vegetarians or sometimes insectivores, but chimps and humans have a meat-rich diet. And we can tell from butchered bones that human relatives have been eating meat for at least the past 2 million years, and actually probably quite a bit longer ago than that. So when our ancestors switched over to an increasingly meat-rich diet, we started eating the same animals that the African hyenas and African lions were eating. In fact, our ancestors may well have gotten a good chunk of their meat from scavenging kills or driving lions or hyenas away from their kills and then eating the meat ourselves. Lions and hyenas will drive each other away from their own kills, and humans may well have done the same thing. As we adopted a carnivorous diet that involved eating antelopes and cow relatives and things like that, we started swallowing cysticerci of species that parasitized hyenas and lions. And so we ended up with species of tapeworm that are most closely related to hyena and lion tapeworm. So that's a neat case of a host switch. And we can even tell roughly when and where that host switch happened. And it's fully consistent with the hypothesis that humanity evolved in Africa and later dispersed out of it, which I thought was pretty cool. Okay, one that doesn't parasitize humans at all, but that you vets in the making might see, is a family called Anoplocephalidae. Anoplocephalidae means no armor on the head. And you can see at the lower left, that picture shows those 4 suckers, but you don't see the hooks that you saw on Taenia. And this includes genus Monoiza, which infects horses and cattle. Does not infect humans as far as I am aware. I mean, or maybe it very rarely does, but normally does not. But one species is a leading cause of horse colic, these intestinal disturbances that horses are known to get. Heavy infections can lead to bowel damage. Oh, shut up. Sorry, phone going off. Heavy infections can lead to bowel damage. You can end up with a type of bowel obstruction called an intussusception. Fun word to say, intussusception. You can lead to bowel torsion and things like that. Horses seem to be prone to having things going very badly wrong with their intestines. And if the bowel gets twisted, that's a surgical emergency. And things like that, Monoiza can be a contributing factor. So this is not something you want to have. it is pretty treatable with the standard veterinary anti-parasite drugs. There's the life cycle of one of them that infects sheep. Eggs pass out in the feces, and the intermediate host in this case are mites. Mites are very small arachnids in the same group as ticks. And this being Arkansas, I know you all know ticks probably more than you wish. Mites are a lot smaller, but they're in the same. There are mites that are parasites themselves, and we'll talk about mite parasites coming up towards the end. Some mite species can cause skin diseases like scabies in humans and mange in domestic animals. You might have heard of cats getting ear mites. A group of mites called the orobatids are free-living, usually harmless as far Okay, did I just drop out? Guys, uh okay, where did I drop out? Where did I what was I talking about last? 'Cause I think I heard something go beep right about the time I was talking about Hymenalepis. Yes, somebody tell me, talk to me. Okay. Orobatids are free living and harmless. All right. Let me just back up and repeat that really quickly. Sounds like you didn't miss that much. I must have been talking about Monoesia eggs, which are pass out in feces and eaten by orobatids, which are harmless mites. The last family I was talking about was Hymenalepis, normally a rodent parasite. H. nana um, has no intermediate host. It just goes from rat to rat. The eggs hatch into hexacanth larvae, which just burrow into the gut and mature there and form cysticercoids, which form adults right there in the gut. And this is one of the few parasites that auto-infects. And then H. diminuta passes out in rodent feces and gets scavenged by beetles. Rats get these from eating beetles. These can infect humans, but there's only a few hundred cases known worldwide because for humans to get these, you have to eat raw beetles, which means that toddlers can get them, and so can people in war zones that are eating insects out of desperation, or cases of people having to eat contaminated grain or flour that's got beetles running around in it. Okay. All right. I think I managed to catch up there. Sorry I dropped out for a second, but I'll go ahead and stop recording.